we're probably going to have to suffer in the short term to be successful in the long term. And I'd quite like to see him persevere with this system. If that's what he wants to do, then do it.
I think it's safe to say that perseverance is a trait that United supporters are becoming well accustomed to. As we look forward to the arrival of Norwegian kingpins Bodo Glimt, we're touching on that game, the Ruben Amorim debut at Portman Road, some standout performers, and much, much more. It is, of course, the latest episode of your Theatre of Red. Hello there, one and all. I hope your week has been productive and you're not suffering too much in these Baltic conditions that we're enduring across the country. It is a new era under Mr. Ruben Amorim, with many of the same issues rearing their ugly head against Ipswich Town at the weekend. But the man is not a magician, people, and good things tend to take time. Joining me today is a well-respected member of the Manchester United community and a man who just so happens to be more than a little handy in the world of illustrations, Mr. Harry O'Loughlin. How is everything today, sir?
Oh, very good, very good. Thanks for having me.
Has the perfect start at Portman Road, a marauding run from a new-look wing-back in Mr. Amad Diallo, resulting in a pinpoint pass to the once again criticised NBA supporting Marcus Rashford to slot home inside 2 minutes. Wasn't going to get much better than that. However, Kieran McKenna is no slouch, as we know, and his decision to alter his side structure after 20 minutes resulted in a highly competitive fixture, and it earned Ipswich a well-deserved point. There's plenty to unpack, but from the 1-1 draw, what was your take from Amorim Mark 1 in the Manchester United hot seat?
I think the performance overall just shows that he's going to need time. I think we can't really draw too many conclusions from a game that's technically 6 days after he's taken over and potentially only had a few training sessions with players returning after an international break. Some players coming back from South America and others playing as late as the Tuesday. I think it's always going to be hard. So I don't think we can read too much into it, but I did see some positives, definitely, for sure.
As I said, a lot of the same kind of niggling issues that we encounter every week and we have done for many years, but there was green shoots there. One of them being Diallo, as I've said. I think many expected that he was going to flourish in this new look 3-4-3 system, very much as a Trincao type number 10 that you see at Sporting Lisbon. And instead, the Ivorian was utilised on the wing, and by and large was one of the better players on the day. I think if you're being totally honest, totally truthful about it, his defensive naivety was on show on several occasions, and I think it was exploited on a couple of occasions also. But his ability overall is such a joy to watch. For me, he has to be one of the first names in the team sheet and moving forward, wherever that may be on the field. I think he supplies a sense of calmness and an understanding on the ball that is rarely seen in somebody so young, particularly when he's still essentially cutting his cloth at the highest level of first-team football. How do you view his performance overall at the weekend, and how do you see him progressing under Amorim at Manchester United?
Yeah, I think you're completely right with what you were saying there. I think we did see a bit of his defensive capabilities. They weren't the best. I think there was a few chances that came from coming down that winger. I don't know if we will see him at wing back again, potentially. I think you could see how Mazraoui played as the right centre back. I think he'll potentially move out again if we have everyone available. But you could see from an attacking point of view, he looked very good. And yeah, the calmness is something that, if you compare it to the left-hand side and the players that we have there, sometimes there's that distinct lack of calmness. So yeah, he brings a nice balance to it. And he always seems to be positive with the ball, which is good. Yes, he'll go backwards when he needs to, but it's never a sense of, oh, I don't know what to do. It's I'm going to do this. It's going to get us moving. And yeah, he looks very positive. His play at the moment definitely makes him one of those first names on the team sheet. But I do personally think we're going to see him higher up, like you said, in that Trincao kind of role on the right hand side in the 3-4-3.
I feel like I'm speaking about Nasser Mazraoui every single week on this show, but it's merited in every way possible. For one, how many positions has he played now? He's played in central defence. He's played on both wings. He's played in a number 10. He's dropped back into a more stabilised central 2 in midfield. So many people questioned at the time of getting him this age-old thing of Bayern Munich do not leave players go who still have something in the tank. I think it is largely accepted across continental football that they have very much got this one wrong. With a player of that composure, technical ability, most importantly, his football IQ, it's such a rare find in 2024. I think when you see him on the football, you're almost convinced that something positive is going to happen. And even if the ball goes backwards, it's generally the correct move at the correct time, and it helps to orchestrate a forward-thinking transition. I agree with what you're saying. I believe he's far more suited on the wing than he is in central defence. The dynamic that this operates and the dynamic that it opens up when you consider Mazraoui and Diallo, if you do see Diallo staying on the field but in a more advanced position, maybe in one of those 2 10s, the prospect of Mazraoui marauding down the right wing and having interchangeable triangles that could potentially open up between Diallo, Mazraoui and Kobbie Mainoo when he's back, to me, that just oozes one of the most exciting prospects that we could see under Amorim has.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think he's a very, very smart player. And I think I heard on the commentary the other day that he has played in a back three before as centre back, but that was back when he was at Ajax, and it must have been 2019 because his partner in that day, or one of his partners, was Matthias de Ligt as well. So it's obviously been a while since he played that role, and to put in a performance like he did at the weekend just shows how adaptable he is. And he's one of the few players that I see on the ball for United, and I don't worry at all. I think he's not going to do anything bad. He's going to play the right pass, whether that's a simple one or something a bit more speculative. I don't worry when he's on the ball. It's quite refreshing to have that player playing for us.
It is imperative that we discuss this as well, Has, because we could have been talking about an entirely different outcome if it were not for Andre Onana. I think once more he's after proving that he has overcome his suspect start to life in the Northwest and is most certainly one of these standout players in this squad. From that pinpoint save from Liam Delap to a little more progress in highlighting his undeniable ability on the ball in the build-up phases. Are you confident that we have the goalkeeper required to continue this rebirth under Ineos and our Portuguese tactician?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's still getting a lot of negative talk about him just because of last season, some of the mistakes that happened, especially in Europe. I think he was unlucky that everyone kind of focused on that quite a bit, and I've then sort of reduced his play down to just getting the ball and knocking it long, when actually you see he's an integral part of our build-up, and the defence use him as an outlet quite often when they're passing. But yeah, those saves that he made on Sunday, we could have been losing 3-1 if it hadn't been for him. The two saves against the lap were incredible. Like, the way that he's managed to save them, most keepers wouldn't. And that's the thing, he's been criticised for some of his shot stopping last year. He was in the wrong position or he did the wrong thing, but he's really coming into his strengths now. The hard bit, I'd say, is that he's having to shake off all that negativity of last season, and I think that still circles round in a lot of people's heads, whether that's United fans or rival supporters. But when I speak to people at work who don't necessarily speak United, they'll always say he's not a very good keeper. But I was like, I often argue with them and say, have you actually watched him recently? Have you seen what he does for the team? And obviously they don't. They just see the mistakes and the howlers that he might have done this time last year. But yeah, I'm very pleased that he's now coming into his own, because we need someone strong at the back, and it's not easy to be United goalkeeper, especially after a keeper like De Gea, where he was arguably our best player for a number of years. He's got big shoes to fill. So I'm glad that he's coming into it. And yeah, I think we've got someone we can rely on. Whether Amorim might see differently just based on how he plays, I'm not sure. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
They often say the managerial position at Manchester United is the most scrutinised position, we'll say, in coaching. I think the goalkeeping position at Manchester United is probably one of the most scrutinised positions in European football. They come under such scrutiny. They come under the definition of daily spotlight and trauma. And like you're touching on a very good point there, because this is a regular characteristic of individuals that do not watch Manchester United on a weekly basis. They might see United on Match of the Day, or they might see some montages on YouTube and just think, Onana was rubbish 18 months ago in a game against Galatasaray, so that must mean he's still rubbish today. When in all reality, this is a footballer that is, at this moment in time, leading the way in this squad as one of the standout performers on a weekly basis. And he's winning points for this football team. If it wasn't for him at Portman Road, we'd been very, very lucky to leave with a
Yeah,
point. And I know that really highlights the nature of the issues that are within this squad, that Manchester United are travelling to a ground that is the only ground in the top flight that is still to taste a home victory in the Premier League this season. And it's a side that have won victory in the Premier League overall. And we're relying on a goalkeeper who inevitably gets man of the match and has to make crucial saves. But
yeah.
the individuals that spent so long critiquing him, criticising him, and lamenting the decision to bring him to the football club, it's amazing how quickly they go into hiding when it comes time to turning around and admitting fault in the nature of their words and actually giving him the plaudits that he deserves. In moving forward, it is clear that this three at the back philosophy is now the new norm in Manchester. And you got players like Lena Yoro, Lissandro Martinez, Luke Shaw, Tyrell Malacia to all return and further boost that build-up structure alongside Andre Onana. In the last 5 minutes as we've been speaking, we've received words that Licha is going to be available on Thursday evening, that he's back. Harry Maguire hasn't made it. And Lena Yoro is also closing in on that too. A huge focal point of this system is the onus on a primary build-up play. I know this because I've been following Sporting for many, many years. And whether it's a build-up in a back five or whether it's against, we'll say, lesser opposition that you would be expected to contain more of the ball and have more possession, alongside wing-backs that are always available either as a passing outlet or a decoy run. We're going back maybe 10 years, slightly more, when Louis van Gaal came and we saw the implementation of a back three in his early days and maybe slight way through the season, and it was abolished fairly quickly with massive, massive uproar from the Stretford end. But how do you feel overall, following United for as long as you have, to see this back three coming into fruition, almost negating the days of a 4-4-2 and these marauding wingers and fullbacks coinciding beside each other?
I think football's changed a lot in that time, and obviously Amorim's had good success with it in Portugal with Sporting over the past few years. So for me, a change and seeing something different isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think you have to adapt with modern football, and yeah, you think of United and you think 4-4-2 wingers. You think of your Beckham and your Giggs, your Ronaldo, your that kind of style of football maybe 20 years ago, and approaching a little bit later than that. And yeah, we might just have to move away from that. And I know from Amorim's comments after the game the other day, I'm not sure which interview it was part of, but he said something along the lines of, we're probably going to have to suffer in the short term to be successful in the long term. And I'd quite like to see him persevere with this system. If that's what he wants to do, then do it. Don't kind of play to what you think you need to play in the Premier League. Play to how you want to play. And if it works, great. If you have to go back to the drawing board at some point, then so be it. But I'm quite happy to see someone come in and have a fresh idea. And we've got evidence that it can work against Premier League teams. If you look at Sporting playing City the other week, they won fairly convincingly. Yeah, there was times where City was on top in the first half, but in the second half they were pretty strong. So yeah, I think we've just got to give it a bit of time, and maybe we will see not the best football for a little bit, and it might be a little bit negative, but we've got to remember that this is a coach who's coming in off the back of completely transforming a Sporting team, so much that Benfica fans have been happy to see him leave Portugal because it means they might have a chance of winning again. Coming to a United team that has no ideas and needs something fresh. So yeah, let's go for it. Let's bring it in. Let's see what happens.
We all bought into the prospect of the philosophy of what Erik ten Hag was bringing from Ajax. 2 defeats in his opening 2 games immediately abolished that entire principle and the fundamental structure that he had, recreated his entire system just to try to gain some semblance of acceptance when there was any bit of the natural fallout from mainstream media. Like you, I share this. I share the optimism in a brand new structure that can revolutionize what's happening. One of the largest parts of that system is the onus on a primary number 9 to truly benefit from the gluttony of opportunities that are ultimately created and the amalgamation of so many attacking players hitting the final third. At Sporting, we saw this with devastating effect through Victor Gyökeres and the endless chances that he receives. At United, we now have this conundrum between Marcus Rashford and Rasmus Højlund, and where Marcus lands in all of this. Now, I say so because we've had ample suggestion that he would be given the opportunity to see if he can thrive in a number 9 position, just as we saw at the weekend. Now, he did score, but a glaring worry from the outing was that he had a total of 12 or 13 touches of the ball overall. Now, this was not a trait of the Gyökeres at Sporting, And it should not be a trait of a forward in this system. Now, admittedly, as you've touched on, it is the definition of early days. And I'm not pointing a finger at Rashford in any way in anger, in any way, shape or form. But we have seen the man as a 9 before. And as a footballer, I think it's largely acceptable that he thrives on runs behind the back line. Now, you're not going to get that in this system because one of the fundamental requirements of every footballer, especially in the attacking third under Amorim, is that they all put in a shift. There's no passengers and everybody has to put in that shift. And for me, Højlund is tailor-made to complete that role for Amorim because I believe he's the closest thing that we have to the Goiker's frame within the squad. He's got the mould, he's got the movement. And I regularly get dragged into online debates about the Dane, but I do truly think that he has the ability to lead the line for a decade. And I actually think Rashford could flourish in behind him alongside the likes of Bruno or Ahmad in that front three system. What is your take on the number 9 in what we can see in moving forward?
I agree with you there, with you saying about Højlund. I think him and Gyökeres are from the same mould in a way. And you can see from the career path of Gyökeres, it wasn't great when he was younger. He was playing at Swansea for a bit, and Brighton he was on loan from, and he's blossomed into this player. So I don't think we necessarily need to worry about Højlund doing it right now, right here. We've got time for him to grow into it. I think the slight conundrum we potentially have at the moment is that Rashford is potentially the only other player other than Højlund who could play that number 9 role for Amorim. We've not obviously mentioned Xerxes, but him himself would say he is a 9.5 rather than a number 9 or a number 10. So does Amorim see him playing that role or not? I think the fact that we've seen Rashford start number 9 at the weekend means potentially he's the alternative to Højlund. I feel sorry for Marcus in a way because even at the weekend he was getting pelters for not tracking back, and he's literally playing number 9. That's the one position where you're not going to come back and track back. Yet we still got people leaving the stadium saying, "Oh, he's not doing enough." And yes, we know Amorim wants you to work your socks off and be given that 100%, but he does get a lot of negativity. And yeah, the fact you mentioned there about him having sort of 12, 13 touches, I think that's just a chronic problem of United at the moment. Even one that Højlund's been struggling with is the Erik ten Hag team of last season. How often did Højlund get the ball? How many touches would he get? How many chances would he get? So I think that's an issue that Amorim's going to have to work on for his 9s in general, be that Marcus Rashford or Højlund or Xerxes if he plays there. So yeah, I'm not too sure how he works on that right now. I think it's something that's going to take some time again. But yeah, I think that's one of our chronic issues is getting that number 9 the ball, and whether that comes from the inside forwards or comes from the wing backs in this system. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to see how that develops over the next few games, especially seeing who lines up there tomorrow evening as well.
One of the standout criticisms that comes is people will say, I don't see where the goals are coming from in this squad. I try to strip it back and I try to look at each individual footballer. Do we have a problem here where there isn't goals in this front line? But when you look at the amount of opportunities that are being created and not being converted, I just think it's one of those things that with a belief in a particular style of structure of football, that eventually those opportunities are going to hit the back of the net. I say so because you look at Rasmus Højlund, the guy has been starved, as you said, but at the same time, the statistics clearly show that as of last season, he is one of the most clinical finishers in the Premier League. And I know people don't want to accept that because I suppose very similar to Andre Onana, they'll look at a footballer and they'll say, well, look, he wasn't good 16 months ago, so he can't be good now. With Rasmus Højlund, they look at it and they say, well, he didn't score in the Premier League until December, so he's obviously not very good. And they totally disregard all the goals in the Champions League. They disregard the fact that after he scored against Villa on December the 26th, that he went on to equal the likes of Erling Haaland, only off him by about 1 goal. But his conversion rate was better. And he also set the record for the most consecutive goals in the Premier League at his age. You've got Marcus Rashford, who has his fault. And he does get pelters left, right and centre, regardless of what he does. You even have to look at it for him in downtime going to a basketball game. And ultimately, this is front page news. But this is a guy who's got the ability to put the ball in the back of the net. It's just his biggest issue is obviously he's a confidence player. He always has been a confidence player. He really struggles with this introverted characteristic that he has when everyone is beating down on him. You mentioned Xerxes as well. Xerxes is a guy that I covered a lot when he was playing at Bologna. And I don't think Xerxes is ever going to be the guy who's leading the line for Manchester United. However, I do think that there is two characteristics of his actual footballing makeup that can really benefit in this system. He can very much play in one of those two roles behind the striker because his link-up play is fantastic.
Yeah,
but as well
agreed.
as that, and it was something that we saw as well as a lot at Sporting, Paulinho, when he was in that two behind the striker at Sporting, often pushed a little bit further forward, and he almost acted as a second striker. All he was doing was looking at being an outlet and a vessel in the front to win the ball and to pass it off to the likes of Gyökeres or anybody else moving forward. And I think Xerxes has that in abundance, and he has that in his locker moving forward. I know it looks bleak, and I know it's very easy to just look at the metrics, look at the statistics and say, there is no goals in this team. We don't have it. I just have a little inkling that there's plenty of goals there to be got. And it's just going to take a little spark for this to operate and moving forward. Now, a lot of people will hit out at me for that. They'll say that I'm being naive and I'm just refusing to accept what's in front of me. But I just have seen so much evidence in the background. I've seen so much over the last 2 years to think that there isn't goals there. And I just have a funny feeling that it's only going to take 1 or 2 games for it to unlock as. And when we do, we're going to see a totally different front line. But one last point that I want to touch on from the game was the decision to start with Casemiro and Eriksen in the midfield. Now, ultimately, I believe it was one of Eriksen's most underwhelming performances in a United jersey, and the game just passed him by in both halves of the field. I thought Bruno actually thrived when he was pushed further back. We saw his pass completion at an irregular high, and he also added 3 key passes. Some were also surprised by the statistic that Rich Face supplied about the coverage of 102 kilometres ran being the second lowest of the season. But what I would say to that with respect is, what do you think is going to happen when you've got those 2 guys in central midfield? I think for me, the surprising factor was the choice to drop Ugarte, the one man who I figured was going to start given their history together. I'd be very surprised if we ever see that partnership line out together again. But despite the public comments from Danny Murphy that Kobbie Mainoo will become a victim of this system, I believe we may see an entirely different pairing in 2 to 3 weeks' time. How do you see a partnership of Ugarte and Mainoo integrating into this side under Amorim?
Yeah, I see that probably being our first choice centre mid pair, and I think the difficulty was that I think Uruguay played Brazil. I think it was Wednesday morning for us. So to travel back from South America and then play on the Sunday, it's obviously a lot of travel time. So I think if we hadn't had that, we might have seen Ugarte start on the weekend. I think that might have been the only issue, really, considering he's a player who's played under Amorim before, should know the system, be someone that he trusts, and we've already seen him come out and talk about him. The Eriksen and Casemiro lineup at the weekend didn't quite do it. And yeah, I think you're right when you say I don't think we'll see it again. Arguably, that both of them have shown performances this season that have been better than last season. Casemiro has definitely picked it up a little bit, whether he's been a bit fitter or doing a bit more. But yeah, as you said, you could see from the lower total of running over the whole game that there was something up there. I can still see Casemiro potentially doing a job for us. I don't think he's going to be partnered up with Ugarte in that middle. It'll be him and one of the other more creative players like Mainoo or Bruno if he's dropping deeper. But I think potentially it would be Mainoo and Ugarte who are that pairing. I think some people might bring up problems with Mainoo and his sort of the amount of ground he covers and the defensive stuff he does. But we've seen over the start of the season, potentially why he's been injured, is that he's done a lot of defensive work rate and been one of the higher, I can't remember the stats myself, but his defensive rate's been pretty high, hasn't it, the start of the season. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see those two together. I think that's probably our primary pairing to go with. It'd be interesting to see how often Bruno starts in that role, whether we see Mason Mount play there as well. But from a centre mid point of view, we're sort of lacking any more defensive minded other than Ugarte and Casemiro as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, I think anybody who's going to critique the value and the worth of Kobbie Mainoo and moving forward in any system needs their head checking, because I genuinely believe this guy is a generational talent. And it shows how fickle football supporters are, that they can just change their mind about somebody like this. Go back 3 or 4 months ago and he was a starlet. He spends a little bit of time in the touchlines through injury, and all of a sudden his career in Manchester is finished. But that brings us up to the present day and the impending arrival of Norwegian kingpins Bodo Glimt. This is actually going to be a first meeting with the Scandinavian side, and United currently occupy 15th in the new look table, but a win could take United as high as 7th pending results elsewhere. I think at this stage, it's not necessarily a must-win game in terms of the nature of qualification, but it's a must-win game to build momentum and to make a statement in the competition. Here's an interesting one for you, and for everyone who loves the nerdy side of the game. Bruno Fernandes has been involved in 11 goals from 13 Europa League appearances. I wouldn't be surprised if he added one or two to that tomorrow evening, Has. What do you think?
Yeah, I always like it when Bruno scores. He kind of silences his critics and haters for a little bit and reminds us all why the player that he is. So I don't forget the player he is, but a lot of people tend to and seem to think he's a problem at times. So yeah, any time he gets an assist or a goal makes me happy because he's probably one of my favourite players. Tomorrow night's going to be an interesting one again. His first home game. It's a lovely platform. I love Old Trafford on a European night, whether that's Champions League or Europa League. The atmosphere always just seems to be a little bit different to a weekend Premier League game. So hopefully we can build something strong and see a good performance to build on.
There's something very, very special about Old Trafford under lights, as anybody who's experienced knows. There's something in the air, and I would give up every sunlight game just to be able to sit under floodlights at Old Trafford. It's just magical. I will say now as well, for the visitors, one man to watch is a guy that I've actually been advised is already on United's radar, and that is Patrick Berg. He's 27. The midfielder leads the table in the competition with 22 tackles and 12 interceptions, which is a phenomenal output. He's going to be at the heart of this side, and he's going to be integral for their chances in breaking any form of momentum. We may very well see a titanic battle between himself and Ugarte on the night as well. Who do you see lining out in the midfield this time around? Because as we saw against Ipswich, that is very much where a game is won and lost, particularly for this United side against any form of opposition.
Yeah, it's I imagine we'll see Ugarte in the more defensive role. It's who partners him. It's whether that's Mainu back in from injury or he goes with Eriksen again. Based on Eriksen's performance at the weekend, I'm not too sure whether he might do, but it really depends where Cobby is up to with from an injury point of view. Whether we see him play a portion of the match and then they swap, or like we said before, Bruno drops a bit deeper. This might be the time that he tries the Cobby and the Ugarte partnership in the middle. But like he said, it is very important. It's a role and a position, part of the field that we've never seemed to have control over since even Paul Scholes or Michael Carrick retired. So yeah, like when you said before about the goalkeeper being one of the hardest positions for United with all the talk, I'd say centre mid's up there as well.
It would just be glorious to go out, not just for one game, but for a passage of games, to be able to say that we can control a football game. And I know that's one of the fundamental things that Amorim wants to bring to Manchester United. More possession, more control. So I'll put you on the spot. What's the score going to be?
Oh, I'm rubbish at deciding this with United because I'm always very biased. I will go for 2-0 to United.
Being biased is okay. That's what this is all about. It's not called the theatre of blue, as this is called the theatre of red. We're allowed to be biased in this. 2-0, we'll take it. That'll be a good one. My man, an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. I know you're up the walls with work, but what you're doing, I believe, deserves far more applause, recognition, because, look, ultimately it's phenomenal. For those listening who are unaware, let them know where they can find your work ahead of the Christmas period and what they can expect to see.
Yeah, thanks for the very kind words there, Shaun. That's very nice of you. So yeah, I'm an illustrator. I do United artwork, and you can find all my sort of artwork on my Instagram, which is hazdoeswhatever. And then I do have a website where you can purchase prints and T-shirts and hoodies and mugs and phone cases. And we've just started our Black Friday sale, so we can get some extra money off, some already decent prices and some good deals there. So that's hazdoeswhatever.com. If you've been down to Old Trafford recently and you've come from the Trafford Parkway, you might have seen a billboard on Wharfside Way. One was of Cobby and the next one was Ashley Young pushing Di Maria into some advertising boards. there's actually another billboard going up tomorrow. I'm not going to reveal anything about it because that's a surprise, but you can see my work in the flesh by Old Trafford, and that's a collab between myself and Casual Football Shirts. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on for me at the moment.
Well, that's brilliant. And just to be clear, I'm in no way benefiting from this, Reds. I know has for quite some time, and I feel like the work that he's putting out there deserves recognition. So we're entering into that period. You can get quite a bit of what you're looking for in one place. So it's definitely worthwhile getting over there, having a look, and time well spent. If you're still here and you haven't already done so, I'd ask you to please subscribe and leave a review, because every single review will enhance the footprint and get us out there to more Reds, just like you, just like me, just like Haz. And it would mean the world to me and everybody else behind the scenes. You can keep up to date with everything that we're doing across all socials at theatre_of_red. And of course, as always, I'm happy to chat with every one of you privately at Shaun Connolly 85 on Twitter. Until next time, stay safe, enjoy the football. I'll catch you all next week.